So, voilà, bonjour. Hello, greetings to the friends of the Philosophy Club here in sleepy little middle of France. But today it's quite historic because it's the day of the French general election, round 2, and we're going to be counting the results later this evening. So I'll share a few things that have been happening in the world and my own little humble part in it, what we've been doing here. So most importantly, we had the British general election on the 4th of July, which is the same day as Independence Day. And yes, I think if anyone's been listening to my Philosophy Club, you'll not be surprised to hear I was delighted at the result. As a British voter, I voted in Scotland. I read all the manifestos carefully, and I did read the Labour Party manifesto. I think it was a good manifesto, back to like how it ought to be. And there were many things in it that I approved of, like setting up a British energy company to create, as a rival to the private energy corporations that have pushed up electricity prices for people. And so that's a good thing. They're also going to recognise an independent Palestinian state, which is very important. First major party, as well as the Lib Dems, to have said that. So there were many good things in the Labour Party manifesto. Our family, when I was growing up in Brighton, was always a Labour voting family. My parents, I think, were committed to that cause ever since the end of World War II, when the Labour Party got a huge election victory in 1945. And I've never really understood. I always wondered why on earth, the British people kicked out Churchill and got rid of the Tories. I do understand now. There was a feeling in British intellectual circles that the Tories were partly responsible for the war. That the right wing in Britain flirted with the right wing in Europe. And there were appeasers in the Tory party who wanted to do a peace deal with Hitler and Mussolini. And in fact, I discovered later when I did my degree in history at the University of London, that the Conservative Party member who was the ambassador in Rome in the 1920s was a friend and supporter of Mussolini. And actually, Mussolini was on the payroll of British intelligence in the first couple of years of his career as a political leader and as a fascist leader. So you could argue that fascism was a product of British intelligence, Tory party intelligence, let's get that clear, who wanted it as a bulwark against, the left. And at the end of Brexit, when Brexit was happening, I had this horrible sinking feeling, because the same people that did Brexit did fascism and supported Mussolini, the hard right of the Conservative Party. And I was watching these hard right parties rising in Europe, in Italy, in Hungary, attempting in France, and I was thinking, these bloody Tories are at it again in Britain. They're stoking this stuff, and I bet you historians will discover that British MI6 agents, ordered by the Conservative governments of Johnson and co, have been stirring up right-wing stuff in Europe. That's just an instinct I've got. So, to be honest, the sooner we get rid of these people, the better from the UK. They're really dangerous. I mean, hang on. They created fascism in Italy and flirted with it in Germany. And they've been at it again. So their thinking is just very antediluvian. And I realised why my parents voted strongly against them and voted for Labour, because the Labour Party is not tainted with this stuff. It's it's on the side of the working people. It's on the side of social egalitarianism. It's on the side of human rights. It's on the side of women's rights. It's at a time when the Tories and even the Liberals weren't allowing women to vote. Labour was campaigning for women to vote right from day one. They were founded in 1900 and founded by Keir Hardie, a Scottish socialist, after whom Keir Starmer is named. because his family were supporters of that tradition. They also founded the London School of Economics in the form of the Fabian Society, where I did part of my degree as a historian. And, so I'm aware of the importance of the Labour Party, really, and they nationalised British Railways, which the new lot are now saying they're going to do again. They're going to renationalise. Because we've had this total privatisation of everything that moves under the Tories, because they've brought in this ideology of private interest, private selfish interest, my profit, my little, my company. And we've lost sight of the fact that actually we have to work for the common good. There's nothing wrong with having private ambitions and private enterprise, but it's got to be moderated by our social commitments to society as a whole, to the common welfare. And so this dumping of sewage by the Tory-run government into the rivers of Britain is another scandal that we've watched. Absolutely shocking, because they don't want to upset their privatised water companies. So yeah, you can do that. I mean, this shows a complete lack of moral intelligence on the part of these Conservatives, and the fact that they've also been selling fake PPE during the COVID crisis. They were creating fake companies to bring in cheap, substandard PPE from abroad, which was not any use, and yet charging the British people millions, unbelievable figures, and then stealing it, putting it in banks in the Isle of Man. It's just like enough is enough is enough. So anyway, that's the end of the Tory party. They lost substantially. They got 131 seats, which I think is too many still. But their majority's fallen. They've crashed in lots of places that I know and love, like Chichester. All over the country they've been voted out by decent people who've turned either to the Liberal Democrats or to Labour. And that's just really good news. The Liberal Democrats, of which I'm a member actually, because they're the sort of intellectual wing of resistance to the shenanigans of the Tory party, and they've replaced them in large parts of Britain, have done extremely well. They've got more MPs than ever before. 71 MPs were elected. Some very good people. And I just want to say I played a role in this because I was working on the phones at night on the election day, and we ring people and say, have you voted yet? Please go and vote. And in fact, the constituency where I was calling people from here in France, we won, the Liberal Democrats won in Eastleigh, which is near Southampton. So, well done, the people of Eastleigh. And I'm really pleased that, Labour's got a really good cabinet now. David Lammy will make a brilliant foreign secretary. He was very against Brexit. He was a very articulate spokesperson against Brexit from the, I think the West Indian community in Britain. He knew Brexit's a terrible idea. It was fake by Tory right-wingers. And he knew as a working class Londoner that this is just disastrous for his people. And so, although Labour won't come out and say, we're going to reverse this immediately, they're going to have to wait and see, and there'll be diplomatic niceties. But I think what's very important is Sir Keir Starmer in the manifesto is pledged to immediately create a defence pact with the European Union. Because one of the key causes of the Ukraine war was because Britain was forced itself out of the European Union, which then Putin was able to exploit as there's a weakness. Now we can go and attack Ukraine. Because Britain is no longer sharing intelligence information, it's not sharing police information, criminal information, and so on. Under the Tory party, which was actually, in my opinion, taken over by criminals, literally. Boris Johnson, I think, is a gangster. And if you don't believe me, read some of the literature I can refer you to. McMafia, and Londongrad was taken over literally by Russian gangsters who had bought the Tory party and were just doing policies that suited Putin. And You know, this is, so what I love about Starmer is he was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service. He's a lawyer. He catches gangsters for a living. And he said he's going to catch the gangsters that did this. If you read in the small print of the Labour Party manifesto, they're saying London will no longer be a place where gangsters and criminals from all over the world can come and bank their money and get away with it. That's what's been fueling London's property price rises. You know, the house I used to co-own in Islington must be worth millions now because it's been bought up by gangsters. And the Labour Party are going to sort of clean this up. And if anyone can do it, Starmer can do it because he knows how to catch gangsters and criminals, and that's what they are. And I'm really delighted the common sense of the British people has prevailed. They've seen through the Tory party. There are no Tory MPs in the whole of Wales now, which is my sacred land where I lived for many years, trained as a teacher, and none also in Cornwall, which is my other favourite haven of Druids. Ancient Cornwall is you know, a sacred place to me as well. So thank God for that. And there's very few in Scotland left. Labour did really well in Scotland, which is great news. And Sinn Féin have become the dominant party in Northern Ireland, which is the party, it's like the Social Democrat, Socialist Party of Ireland that wants to reunite the whole of Ireland with common sense policies. So it's like the Labour Party, as it were, of Ireland. So that's good news too. So really, that's the end of the Tories. I noted a Tory MP has just resigned. Well, no, he lost the election. He's just resigned from the party. He said this party will never, ever be re-elected. What's the point of being a member of it? I believe that's the case. It will never get back into a government during my lifetime, and I hope during my children and my grandchildren's lifetime. It doesn't deserve it because it is porous to criminality. And if you can, you know, it doesn't deserve to be a political party. Now, I said 4 years ago, when they started doing Brexit under Johnson, I was asking constitutional experts, is there any way you can declare a political party treasonous? Is there any way you can say a party as a whole is pursuing policies that are treasonable to the well-being of the entire nation? I've still never had a proper response by constitutional lawyers and people. But I still believe the Tory party should have been declared illegal. There's a whole question about, you know, what is the law of political parties? We've got this ridiculous situation where reform has come up, a hard right-wing racist party associated with Farage, which are little petty fascist types. Now, I believe these are treasonable too, and that they should be declared illegal. Somebody is. And they're not even a political party, they're a company run by Companies House. I think they should be declared illegal. And that's how to deal with it. But, you know, maybe I'll write to Sir Keir Starmer and suggest that. Because I think it's time to not tolerate these kind of extremists in our midst. And Farage and his co are in the pay of Putin, intellectually, and his hard-right ideologists. The complete hypocrisy of Farage is that he was a European MP in Parliament, taking a salary for years. He's got a pension from the European Union, which he now still benefits from. And yet he's done everything he can to stab them in the back and use his moderate skills of rhetoric to try and defeat the European Union's democracy from within. So, you know, I would like him to leave the country, actually. He was about to go to America and support Trump in his election bid. Yeah, that, you know, he doesn't deserve to be an MP, in my opinion. And the poor people of Clacton, I think, are realising they've made a mistake. I also think it's very odd that the media support and give him so much airtime. And this is a problem with the media being in the hands of right-wing rich people who then promote these kind of destabilising forces. So anyway, yes, and one thing I will say is the Labour Party has pledged to rebuild, revivify the National Health Service, which they founded, and to bring back a medical care for the poor in Britain, not just the rich. and dentistry, and you know, it's all gone downhill under the Tories. They've privatised it. So the rich can pay for care through private insurance schemes, but the ordinary people get second-rate, third-rate medical coverage and have to wait, you know, for operations and so on. So I think Labour's pledged to reverse all that, and we'll be watching that carefully. I believe they're really committed to this. But I'm committed also to another parallel project, which is to rebrand the NHS, the National Healing Service. Instead of calling it the National Health Service, it's a slight different emphasis. The National Healing Service is about recognising that health isn't a product that you can sell or package or buy or privatise. It's not a thing, health. Healing is what this service should be doing. And that is about building trust between the doctor and the patient, between the community and the environment, ecological factors, polluting factories, companies that are selling goods that are causing illness. So there's a joined upness about healing, which as a country, which, you know, dumping sewage into rivers is not good for the health of the nation. So if we approach the National Healing Service as the forefront of getting people's health back, I think that would be fantastic. And I know that's what the Labour Party are going to be doing, with strong support and critical input from the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. The Green Party also did well in Britain. We've now got 4 MPs, and in Brighton, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they got a big vote, and having 4 is better than having 1, which is what they had in the last Parliament. So we've got an MP in Brighton, where I grew up, and in Bristol, and in North Herefordshire, and elsewhere. So, you know, the Green vote is there to stay, and they're disgusted at the way the Tories have been. You can't trust them to run a country or to look after our wildlife or our nature. So thank God British people have spoken. Okay, what else have I been up to? Well, that took up quite a lot of effort. I've also been monitoring and been involved with democracy in India as an independent panel member of this independent panel monitoring Indian democracy. Attended a meeting there. We're meeting once a month with some, you know, good Indian intellectuals who are concerned about the way that democracy has been gained in India. It's happening all over the world, this scam whereby populists get elected by demonising and targeting members of their own nation. In India, it's by targeting and demonising the Islamic community, which is a substantial part of India's heritage. And Modi has been, weaponising that. And so we're monitoring all that. And I'll report back on this. I've discovered something I think is a bit shocking. So in the Indian Parliament, they don't have a tradition of the shadow cabinet. So in Britain, I think in France, the people that are in opposition, they mirror the government by appointing shadow ministers, so like a Home Office minister, Minister of the Environment. And then they have what's called a portfolio, where they keep on top of what the government minister is doing, and they can critique it in Parliament. And they can have an intelligent debate about what they're doing. And they can have alternative policies. And that's what's happened with Labour. We've had a shadow cabinet in Parliament, which has now gone into power and become the real cabinet. In India, they don't have that system. There's been no shadow cabinet governance. So Modi does what he wants, and nobody really critiques it properly. Rahul Gandhi is the head of the opposition in Parliament, who I met in Paris. And now we're saying he should appoint a shadow cabinet. That's just the first step. The other thing that doesn't happen in India is that there's no parliamentary question times for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister never goes to Parliament to answer questions of the opposition. Now that's a very important custom for parliamentary democracy to work. It works in Britain very well. It's the one way you can keep the Prime Minister, you can hold him to account. I mean, the fact that he rarely answers the question, and he normally answers with another question, and normally uses that as an opportunity to insult the opposition leader. Okay, that's part of the game, and the Speaker's there to moderate and and keep the debate flowing and, make them answer the questions. But it's a ritual combat by words, which is very important. And they don't have that in India because Modi has never once gone to Parliament and answered questions, proving that he thinks he's some kind of god or a king appointed by God, which he said during the election campaign. I'm here to save India. I was appointed by God, meaning his Hindu god. And not even the real Hindu gods. He's been appointed by Rama. I think he thinks Rama is the most important god. He's never done his Hindu theology. He's forgotten Indra and the real gods, which we've looked at in the last recent meetings of the club. And so anyway, I've been doing that. Also meeting with my World Peace Gardens network this week. We meet once a week. And we had people from Norway, and we had someone from Palestine who is a professor at the University of Bethlehem, who runs an ecological peace centre in Bethlehem, which I've been to. I love Bethlehem. And he's very distraught at what's going on in Gaza, obviously, and in the West Bank. The opposition to Israel, again, trying to do it constitutionally and democratically, uphill struggle, so we were hearing from him. And what's, I think, deplorable is the Israeli army, when it destroys trees, when it uproots people's land, bulldozes gardens. I mean, it's an ecological warfare going on. And I learned, we had another colleague from Lebanon, I learned that Israel has been using white phosphorus onto Lebanon, southern Lebanon, to destroy their trees and their agroforestry and stuff. So this is ecological warfare being waged, which I'm saying enough, stop with all this. Because the environment is all our common heritage, whether we're Palestinian Muslim, Palestinian Christian, Israeli, or whatever our ethnicity or our religion, we share one environment, and if we destroy it, we all suffer. So this chap was going off, we had him on Zoom talking about, he was in the Jordan Valley researching rare plants and biodiversity. Since I was last in Palestine, I didn't know this, but Israel's diverted a lot of the water of the Jordan Valley to be used in Israel. And so the once flourishing stream of the river Jordan, where Jesus and John the Baptist used to do baptizing, is now reduced to a little stream because all the water's been funneled into Israel. And this has really had a terrible effect on Palestine's water economy. I also learned that the water table in Gaza is now very, very problematic because it's such a densely populated area that the streams that give them water were struggling. And now, because Israel has flooded the tunnels with seawater, that's got into the water table. So they can't really drink the water anymore. So what I'm going to call for with my World Peace Gardens network is that we want an ecological peace plan for Israel and Palestine as part of the ceasefire. When they finally stop the fighting, and Hamas has to stop firing rockets at Israel, and Hezbollah have to stop, and Israel has to stop too. There has to be a general peace, pause. We have to have an ecological peace plan, so we rebuild the environment. We get the water table of Gaza sorted. We get the River Jordan back to strength, so that all Palestinians and all Israelis can access clean drinking water. It's the absolute minimum of their human needs. And I was at a conference years ago in University College on long-term peace settlements. It was actually about Jerusalem, and it was people talking about planning for Jerusalem in a two-state solution. Who will own the water? Who will run the electricity? How can they share this up on a very practical level? That's got to be part of our peace discussions here. So yes, so that was important. And then lastly, just to say, I've been at a conference all weekend of the Scientific and Medical Network youth group. They have a youth wing of young researchers exploring new paradigms of science and medicine, who are disgruntled with the traditional materialist ideology that's promoted by academia, which looks askance at spiritual matters, Whereas the latest research in quantum theory and in medicine and so on is much more holistic. Consciousness is part of the healing process and is part of nature. And we can't understand living organic systems, including our bodies, unless we really understand that nature is intelligent in every part. Every atom and every cell has some kind of autonomous intelligence. Some people always quote Sir Karl Popper as the great thinker of philosophy of science, and well, he said unless you can falsify it, it can't be scientific. So all this airy-fairy, consciousness is in matter stuff. It's just airy-fairy stuff. Well, I've got news for people, because I heard the last lecture Sir Karl Popper ever gave at the LSE, great philosopher of science who set up the philosophy department. He ran it for years. And he said in his last lecture, he said, it was a deep green ecological lecture. He said, I was wrong. I've realised, I've done my research, I was wrong. All of nature is intelligent. Every little cell, every little plant, every tree. There's a diffused intelligence throughout nature. So if we're going to talk about knowledge and how we test for what is true knowledge and what is false knowledge, we have to look at it in its wider ecological perspective. The cat knows how to get in out of the rain and how to meow and come in at the window. The cat has a knowledge which is connected with its nature, its cat nature. The tree knows how to grow in such a way that it can get the light, and how to, plants know how to attract bees, and there's a knowingness at the heart of nature, said Popper. And I agree with him as an eco-philosopher. That's why I set up a Global Green University. We need to remember that intelligence, I call it ultimately divine intelligence, because I think there's a higher level of intelligence behind nature that interconnects everything up, the animals, the plants, the trees, and ultimately the planets, the stars, and the whole wider cosmos. I think we need to re-ensoul the cosmos. So, the cosmos is not a desouled place, and our bodies are not just machines. There's a soul diffused throughout it all. So anyway, that's what these young researchers were saying, and there's some brilliant young people doing their PhDs in their 20s and 30s, looking at different aspects of physics and also mathematics. There's some brilliant people at work here. Arabella Thais is doing work on the theory of everything, which is what Einstein was working on at the end of his life. How can you join up all these forces, gravity, electromagnetism, and so on? Well, she's working on it, and she's trying to add in consciousness and spirituality into that mix, because we won't get a real theory of everything until we include literally everything. It follows, whereas if you just say, well, we're just going to look for a theory of everything that's just purely physical and mathematical, it's not a theory of everything, it's a theory of a part. And in terms of the periodic table, it's only just in one of the boxes, the physics box. So a real theory of everything is going to have to encompass literally everything. And that's what these young researchers are doing, bless them. New paradigm explorers, visionaries. And so hats off, I've been, learning and sharing when it's appropriate some of my own insights, like shared the periodic table and some of my mathematical work with my sequel to Newton, the Philosophiae Religionis Principia Mathematica, because Newton said at the end of his life, thank you, I've done my work on gravity, but I don't know what causes it. I think it's got something to do with God. Well, I've taken that as a cue to then, well, what has it got to do with God? So there's 160 chapters written so far, one of which is on gravity and religious mathematics. So I'm looking at, to me, mathematics is a religious, it's a serious and wonderful act of figuring out in wonder what existence is. So if you look at something like the concept of unity, oneness, there's a chapter on that. That's a theological question, the unity question. Is God one? Many people say yes, there's a unity behind existence. But that very concept of unity, therefore, is mathematical, as well as religious. And what I'm calling for in this book is the overlapping study of the two fields, which hitherto have been totally kept disparate. And it's been something you daren't talk about in academia because Newton himself wasn't allowed to talk about it. Professor of maths at Cambridge was told by his colleagues just to be quiet about religion. And he published a secret book saying all religions come from the one source, a sort of precursor to the table. And he was told to put it away in his drawer and not mention it to anyone. And it was not published till the University of Liverpool in the 1950s, finally published it. So I'm sort of picking up the pieces from where Newton left off there, and in my own humble little way, on behalf of researchers that will come after, and want the human right to ask these questions. So that was very exciting. And another mathematician who's doing a PhD in California, Shanna Dobson, a walking genius, really, I'd say. She's also working on the mathematics of everything. And we were talking about, is it possible to devise an AI system that could reach enlightenment? Could we program it to know everything from all directions simultaneously? So it would literally be a sort of an imaginal AI enlightenment space. And then I was saying, well, if we can do it with that, why can't we do that with humans? Why develop it as an artificial thing? Let's have natural intelligence, human intelligence. Anyway, she gave a brilliant talk called The Dark Imaginarium, looking at higher mathematics, really. So, and other people were looking at art, why creativity is part of the reclaiming our right to be artists. We're all artists. And she got us doing paintings. There was a brilliant musician rapper doing rap music with scientific lyrics. So he was rapping on quantum theory to a sort of jazzy background and dance moves. And that's one way to get it out in the nightclubs, this divine unity. And as he put it, going higher. It was a brilliant performance by Jason, Jahson. Yeah, so well done to the youth. It gives me hope that people are on the ball here, searching for visions of a new paradigm. And then finally, we come to France. La Belle France. Today is their final round of the general election here in France. I'm hoping, I don't know, I'm not a member of any political party in France. I'm not active, but I do believe in human intelligence, and I believe the French are intelligent enough to realise that voting in the hard right, Marine Le Pen's group, would be disastrous for France. They're just a retrograde, sort of neo-fascist kind of tail end of Mussoliniism. I mean, why on earth would the French go back there? We got rid of those guys after a very hard struggle in the 40s. And there were Nazis roaming around here in the little village in France. We don't want those types back with their way of thinking. What we want is a liberal alliance with the socialist tradition, so that we have, unlike in Stalinism, which had sort of socialism without liberalism, we have the emphasis of Montesquieu and the liberal tradition in France that understands the importance of liberty in the tricolore, so to speak, and yet also solidarity and equality, so that we marry up those different streams of the progressive movements in France, joining it with the ecological stream, which is important here. I've been to Les Verts once. I went to their national conference in Saint-Denis because I was an activist and still am in the sort of green community. And yes, so I just hope that France doesn't vote for the right wing. The trouble is, and I'll just say this, that what's happening in modern systems is that the social media can be now taken over and hacked by very, very rich people. You can buy